Lesson 6, Section 3, Inductive and Deductive Bible Study in relation to exegesis. Okay, in studying scripture, scholars and students often distinguish between inductive and deductive approaches. While these terms are widely used in practical Bible study, it is important at an academic level to define them precisely. Examine their methodological underpinnings and situate them within the broader discipline of exegesis. So let us start with inductive Bible study or inductive reasoning. Let us put it that way. Inductive Bible study is a bottom-up approach, starting with the text itself and moving toward understanding. It emphasizes observation, analysis, and the extraction of meaning from the scripture before drawing conclusions or application. So the key features will be text-centered. Again, the process begins with careful reading and observation of biblical passage. The text is primary. Then the analytical process, which means the method involves 3 primary steps, will be 1, 2, 3, observation, interpretation, and application. So you see it is kind of exegesis, but the first and 2, and then the third we jump into hermeneutics, isn't it? So the first it says observation, what does the text say? This includes identifying literary features, grammatical structure, historical context, and key terms. That's what we said. In exegesis, interpretation, then what does the text mean in its original context? We are moving towards the exegetical results, that this involves exegesis proper, like understanding authorial intent, audience, and cultural historical background. So we are bringing more about the context itself of the passage, and then we jump into the application. How does the meaning of the text inform contemporary belief, theology, or practice? Applications is only possible after meaning has been carefully extracted. So we have kind of a condensation. So it is a method of empirical and evidence-based. The method requires the reader to draw conclusions from the evidence of the text itself, avoiding preconceived theological agendas. So when we do exegesis, just plain exegesis, and sometimes a little of hermeneutics, we hope that we are doing it through inductive Bible study. So it is kind of the hope. Hope is not the word, it's maybe implicit. So the relation from this inductive Bible study to exegesis, we'll see that inductive study directly embodies exegesis. The core of inductive Bible study, observation and interpretation, is exegesis in practice, carefully examining words, syntax, context, literary structures to understand the passage's original meaning. Inductive study ensures that theological reflection and application are grounded in the text, not imposed upon it. So now you are thinking a little bit like, yes, we know what is to do an inductive Bible study. For example, it's what we did in studying Luke 137. Inductively will involve observing the words and grammars of the Greek text, investigating the angelic announcement context in the first century Judaism. Was it common or no, or what? And drawing out the theological principle of God's omnipotence before considering modern application. That will be the way we did it. So it was kind of expected when we do very plain and basic exegesis and very plain hermeneutics, we will do in inductively form. So let us move now to deductive Bible study. So this is at the top, this is a top-down approach, beginning with a theological principle, doctrinal premise, or question, and then examining the biblical text to see how it confirms, illustrates, or supports that idea. And this is what sometimes in very, very broad ways to say it is when we are doing theology before even paying attention to what the context of a passage of a situation is. So the key features is the principle center. Remember, not text center. Principle center, the study starts with a hypothesis, presupposition, or doctrinal statement. And then the process is also in 3 steps. First, we have identified the theological principle or framework. For example, God is omnipotent. And then two, an examination of a scripture for texts that relate or illustrate this principle. And then the synthesis, determining how the texts collectively illustrate or support the principle. And so by this time, I guess that you already identified that systematic theology is a deductive Bible study. Isn't it? We have an attribute of God, and then we try to find it in different verses in the scripture, different passages, and it is fine with that. It is nothing wrong. The point here is to be clear that we can separate those two kind of reasoning to identify the difference, and we will be transparent in our study to say, well, I am approaching this way or I am approaching this way. Okay, the third key feature is theory guided. Deductive study is influenced by prior theological or doctrinal commitments. The text is consulted to validate or illustrate a pre-established concept. So how it is the relation to exegesis? Deductive study can include exegesis, yes, why not? But it is secondary to the principle being studied, okay? The risk is that without careful textual analysis, the study may lapse into eisegesis, not exegesis, eisegesis, reading one's assumption into the text. However, when properly disciplined, deductive study can benefit from rigorous exegesis. The principle guides exploration, but careful textual analysis ensures fidelity to the scripture's original meaning. For example, one time I was studying the New Testament and with a group of students in master degree as well, and we were trying to identify the concept of inspiration in any passage in the scripture. So we were trying to be deductive, where the passage itself might not immediately tell us that the passage is inspired, but we know. So how I can identify if it is present in a passage. So it was very interesting study. We studied about five books of the New Testament and trying to find all the passages that are how the theology of inspiration was present in everything. We know it's present, but can the passage itself tell us? So that was the deductive study. But when we did exegesis for the passages, we found it that it was very hard. So that then we come through the theology of inspiration is a methodology, not really is something that we are going to impose into the text, isn't it? So an example of the deductive, I'm sorry, okay, an example is starting with the principle God is omnipotent, and a student may examine Luke 137 or other passages to see how scripture expresses this truth. expresses this truth. And exegesis ensures that each passage is accurately understood in its own context, preventing forced harmonization or misapplication. Okay, so yeah, we can go uh, with a deductive worldview, with a deductive intention, but then when we do exegesis, we have to be honest and apply even the intellectual virtues of honesty. We approach with the intellectual virtues of curiosity, but then the honesty will tell us, okay, I cannot find this particular principle in this passage. So exegesis will help us. And with this, then we come back to a comparative chart when I just put kind of the key features for each one, just to compare and contrast when we are approaching in one way or the other. It's usually a beautiful art, and the beautiful art of exegesis, that at some moment we need to use the inductive reasoning, and at some point we need to use the deductive reasoning. And that is the beauty of exegesis and hermeneutics. So at a master's or scholarly level, it is important to integrate inductive and deductive approaches thoroughly. Inductive studies as primary, scholars first engage in rigorous exegesis, examining language context, genre, and historical background. This ensures that conclusions are grounded in the text. Number two, deductive study as complementary. Complementary. Once exegesis has established meaning, deductive reasoning can explore systematic theology, doctrinal coherence, and thematic synthesis across passages. So integration in research, for example, when analyzing lookouts, a student might use inductive exegesis to understand individual passages, conditional sentences, as we are going to see them, and employ deductive reasonings to see how these passages offer a broader theological theme, like we discussed in the lesson of of Luke's theology, how Luke was presenting different topics of theology, like human response to God's kingdom. So a key principle is that exegesis always precedes hermeneutical application or deductive synthesis. Inductive Bible study or inductive reasoning serves exegesis. Deductive study benefits from exegesis but cannot replace it. And with this, then we conclude this section. And I want to ask you this question. When you study the Bible, do you tend to approach the text inductively or deductively? And why? So at this point, maybe you will want to do a self-exploration of your tendency, your approach.